Hello and welcome to a network render controller troubleshooting tip for LightWave 3D. This tip will cover how to upgrade to a new version of LightWave that's released. So let's be honest, the only time that NewTek ever releases a new version of their software is the day after you install the existing new version of the software. Obviously, if you don't need to upgrade, the best bet is to not upgrade. And so check the release notes to see whether or not you need to upgrade. In the case that you do, these are the steps that you're going to need to follow to upgrade your NRC controller. And I'm just going to be dealing with the controller software on this workstation. If you've seen the previous video that goes into the detail here, I'm not going to go into as much depth because some of the steps are exactly the same. So I'm going to go to the C drive where I just installed 1.4 to show you how to do the upgrade. And this is where we're familiar with all the different versions of LightWave that you might be running. Now we don't have to set the permissions on this folder because we did that in step 1 of that first video that you saw. And that's the reason why we don't have to redo it, because if you set the permissions here, they apply to any folder that's within this file. So we're not setting any permissions in this video. So the first step is to go to your existing version that you're running the network render controller and choose the properties. At this point we're going to go to the sharing tab, advanced sharing, and we are going to unshare this location. So you can see here we have Control 2019 as the share name. I'm going to uncheck that, click OK. It's going to tell you, hey, don't do this, but do this anyways. Click Close. So under the new folder, I'm going to right click and choose Properties. I'm going to go into the Sharing tab and Advanced Sharing. I'm now going to share this folder and give it the same name. Under the permissions, I'm going to remove everyone. And at this point, you would make sure that all the accounts that have access to the other share are set up exactly the same. In this case, I'm just using my account as the one account that accesses this information. Change permissions needs to be allowed, and click OK and close. So now we have the permissions set on the share. If we want to validate that, you can come to the Control 2019 link or whatever link you may have set up in Quick Access. And notice that we don't have the config file or the content directory. So this lets us know that the share now works, but we now need to recreate the config directory and move the content over. I'm going to click back. And the next step is to copy the content directory. So I'm going to copy this. In fact, you can actually cut it, and I'm going to move it to the new folder. Right click, paste. So that completes this step. So the next step is to go back into the support directory, go to the plugins directory, and you're going to move any of your custom plugins from the plugins directory under your old folder into the new one. Now if you go into the old folder under the previous version and you have additional folders that are used in your LightWave setup, you will need to copy those over as well. I'm not going to cover the specifics because your third-party plugins may have different folders that they utilize for LightWave. In the new directory, the next step is to create a new folder for the config. So this step is exactly the same. So we have this directory that the NRC controller will now be using, but we don't have any config files in here. So the next step is to go into the new version of LightWave and configure it. Now using the UNC path that we had set up, I'm going to go into the content directory and get this URL ready to go. And so now I've loaded the new version of LightWave and I'm going to go to the configuration for the path file. By default, LightWave chooses to put the content directory in your user account. This is the path that needs to be updated. So now that that's been configured, I'm going to close LightWave so that it changes the configuration files. So I'm going to go to the user account, go to my NewTek folder. I'm going to see the new version of LightWave. The preferences are here. And the configuration files I need to copy are the 1.4-64 config and your extensions file. So I'm going to copy those, come back into the Control 19 folder, go to config, and paste. So now that I have these here, the final step is to come into the NRC engine for 1.4, and we're going to update the config directory. So I'm going to come back into the Control 2019 quick link and go to the config directory, copy this, and paste it into the config directory here. Close that. So at this point, if I close out the NRC controller and load it back up, we just want to verify that it retains the config directory. So now you can add a scene. Go to the Control 2019 folder, Content, Scenes, and load up Test Frame. So this is the samples file that I used in the first video, and I'm simply going to start rendering this scene. And this will validate that the setups are all correct. What I'm expecting to see is files start to show up here in the render folder. And there we go. So this is the same kind of a file that we saw in the first video, and so I will say this is a success. So this is a quick tip on how to upgrade your NRC engine to go from one version of LightWave to the next.